Ridiculous.
Ridiculous, but I bet it was for a significant amount of money.
Still ridiculous.
Yeah, but fun. I'd watch it. Look, Jake Paul wants to test himself against actual, not just world champion, but one of the greatest of all time.
Really fought, and it wasn't fixed. Jake Paul would not survive 45 seconds.
I don't know about that. I think it would take a few rounds.
Really?
But yeah. First of all, Jake is a lot bigger. Jake's a lot bigger.
But what weight would they fight?
Well,
it's not about the number. If it was about the number, we could have started up. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. It makes no sense for me. It's not my what I'm looking at right now.
Joe Rogan was shocked to learn that Jake Paul had offered Francis Ngannou the chance to fight him next after his fight with Gervonta Davis had to be scratched. Rogan said on his podcast that the fight was crazy and almost dangerous for the YouTuber-turned-boxer. One of the most dangerous punchers in combat sports is the former UFC fighter who has become a boxing superstar. Rogan asked Jake if he really knew what he was getting himself into. He did say, though, that the match would be a huge show if it ever happened.
Francis knows that, and Nikita calls Francis. This is Francis telling the story. Nikita calls Francis and says, hey, we need your help. We need an opponent for Jake. Tank is out. And Francis says, all right. Francis says, well, how can I help you? Nikita says, well, we're looking at an opponent for Jake. Tank Davis is out. And Francis says, all right, but specifically, how can I help you? Nikita takes a third swing at the bat. He says, well, we need an opponent. We need a boxer. We need a partner. We need somebody to fight Jake. Tank is out. And Francis asks him again, okay, what specifically can I do?
When Jake Paul's exhibition date with Gervonta Davis had to be cancelled because Davis was facing major legal charges, Paul and his team rushed to find someone else to replace Davis. Francis Ngannou, a former UFC heavyweight champion, who now fights in a variety of styles, was one of the names that came up. He is one of the most dangerous men in striking sports because of his size, strength, and reputation.
Tank Davis saga, I think the fight is going to be completely canceled and rescheduled, and now we have potential opponent names and some people being ruled out coming into today. This is not a joke. It was said by Mike Coppinger and others that the #1 candidate to replace Tank Davis in a Jake Paul fight, probably on a different date, was going to be Francis Ngannou. What the But we have an update on that and other potential names that Jake could fight. Again, I think on a separate date, and why I think the Jake and Tank fight is completely off. No more, maybe, no more, we don't think it'll happen. I think it's completely off.
Michael Bisping brought up the huge difference in size between Jake Paul and Francis Ngannou by saying that Paul's original goal was a much smaller lightweight named Gervonta Davis, but that plan fell through. Bisping said that Paul is on different ends of the spectrum when it comes to physical challenges and size when he moves from Davis to Ngannou. He said that going from fighting someone small to fighting someone as big and strong as Ngannou is a big difference, not just in skill or record, but also in raw mass, reach, and danger.
Older than him, like Mike Tyson, who's 58, Anderson Silva, who was way past his prime, people like Nate Diaz, who were way smaller. Gervonta Davis really did take the piss. I mean, that was just the craziest shout ever. To go from fighting Gervonta Davis, way smaller, to now boxing Francis Ngannou. I mean, listen, if he does it, fair play. But I just call #1 bullshit on this brother, because I don't see this happening. No.
This is #1 bullshit.
I just don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. Nate Diaz, yeah, 100%. I mean, he beat him once already. I'm sure Nate Diaz would love to get another big payday, because obviously boxing on Netflix and going up against Jake Paul, given his success, given the name that he has, and given the magnitude of his events, Nate Diaz will get paid an absolute fortune once again. We know that it wasn't too long ago Jake Paul was talking about boxing Anthony Joshua, and that never came to fruition. There's absolutely no way he would box Anthony Joshua. If he did, if he was to do something like that, whether it be Anthony Joshua or Francis Ngannou, I'd give him his props, I'd give him his credit, and you never know. Maybe he would do it just for the just for the clout? Because in many ways it would be, sorry about the airport notifications, it would be, you know, an admirable thing to do. And it will be Jake Paul taking on somebody bigger with more experience.
Francis Ngannou says that Jake Paul's team's request for him to fill in for Gervonta Davis caught him off guard. He said the proposal came out of the blue and didn't seem to fit with his present goals. It was said that money was talked about, but Ngannou turned down the idea, saying that the terms and conditions didn't make sense to him. He asked how moving from Davis to him was being presented as a sensible choice, making it clear that this wasn't about money. It had to do with how the fight made business sense.
Think about you to fight Jake to replace Gervonta. I'm like, who's Jake? You know, like, I was so confused, you know, like, I wasn't expecting that at all. And he said, yeah, Jake Paul, you know, he's fighting. And I'm like, no, bro, come on, don't, don't disrespect me like that. And then they even say like, they even come out after and say, and what if the number are good? He sent out some number. I'm like, it's not about the number. If it was about the number, we could have started talk. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. It makes no sense for me. It's not my what I'm looking at right now.
Daniel Cormier, a former UFC champion, told Jake Paul straight out that fighting Francis Ngannou would have bad results. Cormier says that Paul isn't ready to fight a heavyweight who comes from a mixed martial arts background because of Ngannou's deadly power and the fact that Paul isn't up to the challenge because of his lack of experience and strength. He makes it sound like Paul could face real problems if he helps someone whose strengths are much greater than those Paul has usually dealt with. It's easy to understand. This isn't just about show or money. There is more risk than profit.
Jake Paul goes from fighting Gervonta Davis to calling out Francis Ngannou. Jake Paul don't want those problems. I can't say it any different. Jake Paul does not want any Francis Ngannou problems. He don't. He does not want those issues. While I think it's crazy and I credit him for doing that, and I'm surprised he did that, this could be a ploy. Him poking out his chest, saying, I want Francis. He don't want those Francis Ngannou problems. I don't care what Anthony Joshua did to Francis Ngannou. Jake Paul gets in there with Francis. Francis will knock his head off this planet. You don't want those Francis problems. I watched Francis put down Tyson Fury. Sure, Anthony Joshua beat him. But even if Jake got power, I don't think he got power to be dealing with Francis. Because all it takes is for one to land and he gonna put you out.
Cormier questions Jake's intentions and says it seems like it's more about getting attention than real competition. He also says Jake doesn't know how hard it is to fight a heavyweight who can punch through gloves. Ngannou is famous for his strength in mixed martial arts, but in boxing, it gets even stronger. Cormier tells Jake that he could have a very short night if he fights Francis without knowing the difference between wrestling and boxing defense.
Right? Boxing is much different than mixed martial arts. The target audience might be the same, but the demographics different. The places where people are brought up are different. There's bigger entourages in boxing. It's just a different world in boxing. We've known that from the very beginning. We know that Gervonta Davis was not going to just play to Jake Paul's rules. I still don't know exactly why this thing is falling apart, but it is falling apart bad. It is bursting at the seams. We are almost exactly where we should have never started. This should have never gotten started, but it did. But we are almost now exactly where we need to be in the fight, and that's it being off.
A lot of experts think that the plan for Jake Paul to fight Francis Ngannou very quickly is a bad idea for both Paul and the fight story as a whole. They point out that Paul's first opponent, Gervonta Davis, dropped out at the last minute, which is why Paul's team asked Ngannou to take his place. That being said, Ngannou said that coming in this late doesn't make sense for his future. Because of the short notice, Paul wouldn't have enough time to prepare for a heavyweight like Ngannou, who is very strong and has a lot of experience. A lot of experts are saying that the fight between Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou and the one that is supposed to happen between Jake Paul and Ngannou are similar. They chose spectacle over traditional boxing quality, crossover appeal, and stylistic mismatch as their main reasons. Fury fought Ngannou, a former MMA champion, and had a harder time than imagined. A fight between Paul and Ngannou would follow the same pattern. A fighter who is famous on social media is taking on a huge athlete with a lot of power. Even though Fury was the heavyweight champion, he said the fight with Ngannou was one of the hardest he's had in the last 10 years.
What I do find interesting about this is, okay, if they push it back to December, then that's slightly different. But this is the kind of one situation where you're kind of 10 days out, 2 weeks out from a fight, whenever they first got wind of this problem. This is the kind of situation where it would be possible that Jake Paul and Nikita Badarian and MVP, who are very, very shrewd people, this is the one occasion where they might end up making a mistake, taking someone at short notice who they shouldn't take. Because there'd be a whole raft of people putting their hand up for it, wouldn't they? Thinking, I'll take him at short notice. I'll make out that I've been sitting on a beach, eating and drinking for the last 6 months. I'll anything just to get in there with him. And then on the night, I'm gonna knock his head off. There'll be loads of people putting their hand up for this, and you'd have to be incredibly careful about who you took at short notice, because for it to have any kind of meaning, you would need to take a decent opponent at short notice, because obviously they're up against it because it's short notice. You couldn't take some barely warm body at short notice, because that would be even worse than giving them full notice. So this is the one area, the one situation in which it would be easy for them to make a mistake, but they don't make mistakes with things like this. They just don't. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they haven't been tempted into, somebody. Yeah, Ngannou, that'd be a mistake. It'd be such a mistake. I know he got flattened by Joshua, but so what? Joshua is a 2-time unified champion of the world, and Ngannou's 270 pounds of absolute granite. That would have been a terrible, terrible mistake if they'd given him the fight.
And he dropped, people. I know, my opinion, Tyson Fury won that fight with Ngannou, but he still put Tyson Fury.
He was close.
Recently, Chael Sonnen said something about the upcoming fight between Jake Paul and Francis Ngannou that made people laugh and really interested them. He said that the fight doesn't have the balance of a normal competition from a sports point of view. It's more of a test to see how much pain Paul can take. Sonnen told people that Ngannou only needed one clean shot to knock out heavyweight boxer Tyson Fury, who was bigger than Paul and had a history of fighting. He thought that if Fury had trouble surviving Ngannou's power, it was unlikely that Paul would be able to do the same without major risk.
When Francis says fighting Jake Paul wouldn't make sense, well, what in hell do you think Tyson Fury got for boxing you? These aren't mean things for me. This is a reality. Tyson Fury knew there was a check. Name one person you'd rather see Jake Paul fight than Francis Ngannou. Is a real challenge. How Tyron Woodley, Ben Askren, Anderson Silva, Mike Tyson, how those aren't real challenges, I don't know. But this is the story as we're told. And do you see where that would satisfy so much? Do you see where that would force even the biggest hater to be quiet? And my job for something to make sense is the biggest check against the easiest opponent. I cannot think of anything I would rather see Jake and Francis do.
A lot of people know Jake Paul from his big ads and attention-getting stunts, but this time the idea doesn't seem to work. His last fights were against fighters of a similar weight and level of experience, but this one feels off and doesn't have a clear goal. People are starting to think that Jake's plan to stay relevant by matching up with strange people might finally be failing. More and more people think that this event was made for attention rather than competition. This is why ticket sales haven't gone up despite weeks of ads and interviews.
And it's an exhibition and he's retired. Tank still being in the competitive nature of the sport throws this one completely off for me. And the fact that Jake is like 60 pounds bigger than he is, right? Like Mike was obviously far older than Jake, and that was the big knock on that fight. Mike should not have been in there with Jake. Said that many times. Jake has fought so hard against people saying he's bad for the sport. He's bad for the sport. He doesn't actually want to fight or step up or do any of this stuff. And I've kind of had his back when I'm like, no, he is doing what most boxers have done early in their career. But this gives those people more ammo to be like, yeah, bro, look, this is what we're talking about. When we say he's bad for the sport, or when we say that he's doing stuff that doesn't make sense, and he's making a mockery of things. This is what they're talking about. And again, I wouldn't have any problem with it if Tank was way past the point where he could fight competitively at his weight class and have fights with guys like Shakur Stevens, or even, again, rematching guys like Ryan Garcia.
Chael Sonnen says, it's funny that Jake is so sure of himself and ready to fight fighters much better than him, but it's a whole different story when he faces Francis. It's important to him that Jake doesn't have Tyson Fury's size, strength, or chin. There's no way Jake could take even one punch from Fury if he could only take one.
Both involve bludgeoning. You can't even grab a hold of the guy or try to squeeze him. You can only bludgeon and be bludgeoned back. I think you're got an uphill battle to question somebody. But they have been very effective in doing just that to Jake. Hey, you start with this NBA guy, and then even those MMA guys, they're not boxers. And then when you got around to the boxers, but they weren't current boxers. Then when you get around to the current boxers, they're not big enough boxers. And I just loved it. When I heard that Francis Ngannou might be going against Jake, I loved it. I mean, what's that gonna look like? How many of those shots from Francis can you take? Tyson Fury, if you're talking clean, Tyson Fury only took one. Everything else, Tyson was able to roll with. Big Francis only had to hit him one time. That's a compelling story, in my opinion.
Timothy Bradley pointed out that the breakdown of the planned fight between Davis and Jake Paul had effects on many more people than just the two athletes. Bradley said that when the deal fell through, promoters, broadcasters, event sites, sponsors, and marketing partners all lost money. The fight was supposed to bring in a lot of money from pay-per-view sales and sponsorships, but Davis got into legal problems, which made networks back off and brands protect their images.
Tank, let's get on Tank real quick. You gotta be the dumbest dude, in the history of boxing, bro. $40 million, dog, down the drain. You gotta be the dumbest dude I've ever seen in the history of boxing, bro. Seriously. I'm like, $40 million, bro. Wealth. Literally wealth, bro. Going down the drain. I don't understand it. I can't make the... I don't understand it. But I'll tell you this. MVP promotions, whatever the hell y'all call it, most valuable promotions, shit, more like rookie promotions. Yeah, more like rookie promotions. You didn't know what you were dealing with. You had no clue. This has always been down Tank's alley, man. Now, let me just say one thing. You innocent until proven guilty.
At the same time, money had already been spent on making the goods, advertising it, and moving it around. Likely, a lot of that money is gone now. Bradley used the incident to show how dangerous the business side of fighting can be. Everyone who supported the event has to pay when one fighter's image takes a hit. The possible fight between Jake Paul and Francis Ngannou is very different in terms of size and strength, so Paul needs to take a very different approach. Ngannou, a heavyweight who weighs about 260 pounds, has the same amount of raw strength as the toughest punchers in combat sports. Paul, on the other hand, is used to playing against much weaker opponents and in games that are based on speed, movement, and showmanship rather than survival. Paul's training camp would have to change a lot before he could even start to fight against someone as strong as Ngannou. From building more muscle and making it last longer to completely rethinking footwork, sparring dynamics, and fitness. When you're up against a heavyweight who it's like a freight train, what works against light opponents just won't cut it. In short, a lot of experts think Paul shouldn't treat this fight like any other celebrity boxing show. He would have to spend months working out with the best teachers in order for this fight to make any sense from a competitive point of view.
It would be something unique. It would be something incredible. It's the same reason that I would be intrigued by a Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua fight, although I would never advise Jake Paul to take a Anthony Joshua fight. I wouldn't advise him to take a Francis Ngannou fight either, because as much as Anthony is far better, which we saw when they actually fought, Joshua slept Francis Ngannou quicker than me after 2 melatonin. It was quick, fast, in a hurry, completely dominant. But we also saw Francis Ngannou go toe-to-toe with the heavyweight champion of the world at that time. Yes, he was out of shape. We understand that. But Tyson Fury on that night got the shock of his life when Francis Ngannou not only went toe-to-toe, but put him down and danced on it. To this day, I think that fight could have gone Francis's way. Point being, there are levels to this shit. Not just in boxing, but in combat in general. And the size difference Francis would have over Jake would be incredible, but it would have been a great event, and a lot of people would have tuned in. Francis, though, is saying that's not happening.
How can they go from like Gervonta Davis to Francis Ngannou? Like, I mean, Gervonta Davis is a fantastic boxer, but and is a one-shot knockout artist. But come on, like the weight different and everything, it makes no sense.
It's a good point. I mean, obviously, Francis is right about the weight difference, but it's a good point in general for what do you do next? Jake has sparred guys like Shakur Stevenson, Ray Ford, Montana Love to try to prepare for Tank Davis. And even if you book this fight on December 12th or December 19th, that's still a completely different fight than you were going into. Completely different matchup, size-wise, skill-wise, the things that you're going to need to even try to compete.
Is this a high-stakes, exciting matchup, or a bad matchup that should never happen? Leave your thoughts in the box below.